Yeah.
Good evening, committee, good evening, other members, good evening, officers. I think it's an interesting tonight. Can I, a member of the public? Can I agree to sign off the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of July as a correct record?
Agreed.
Apologies for absence.
No received, Chairman.
None received, no apologies.
Councillor Howard.
Councillor Howard, thank you. Declarations of members' interest. To declare members' interest now or not at the time during the agenda when they appear. Are they interested to declare now? No. We move on to the corporate issues, council learning and development. I was going to ask Councillor Warren, do you have to proceed on that quickly?
I haven't really anything to
Add to the paper. Tony,
not really, Chairman, but I could point to some relevant sections if it helps members. But
okay, that's fine, yeah.
The report before us sets out the history of the last year in member development events that have taken place. Section 5, the evaluation, maybe of some interest in respect of the budget and how that's used. The final bullet point of section of page 6, first set of bullet points on section 5, says that we spend on average £92 per member, which if we exclude one-off costs in respect of disability adjustments, compares with £88 £13.14 compared with £92 for the previous year, and that compares with the average for 12-13 from the local government workforce survey of £86. So it seems we're at a level which is consistent with others in terms of spend. Some useful information about quality of feedback. Then go on, section 6 talks about induction, 3 new members during the course of the year, and the induction was dealt with more informally than previously when there had been large numbers of members coming in. Section 7 talks about the member learning and development group and some of the work that they've been carrying out during the course of the year. And section 8 takes us to the programme for the current year for 14-15, and that's attached as an appendix to the paper.
Thank you, Steve. That's very helpful. Open for questions or comments? If not, are you happy to accept the oh, sorry, my apologies, Councillor Lambert.
Oh, thank you for allowing us to speak, Chair. Just looking at the average attendance for members being 6.3, I wonder if it'd be worth doing something like a quick questionnaire, just asking people why they don't take up the training sessions. Is it the timing? Is it the subject's repeated itself? Is it something that doesn't interest them? Because obviously, you know, when we look at the training programmes, if it's something that they felt they've done plenty of times before, we need to look at doing something again.
I think we've done that before actually. I think we have done something along those lines, but also we haven't had the development panel, of course, and I no doubt your chair currently on the right. Is that anything that's been done on that?
not recently, but there was something done about 18 months ago, I believe.
18 months ago, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole range of reasons why that might be the case, maybe. I mean, I always want to encourage members to put themselves forward for training if they think it's relevant to their role as a councillor. And obviously, especially more senior members as well, they have additions to more responsibility. It's important that they have, you know, adequate training or adequate courses to go on where they think is relevant to the role. And I think that should, you know, all members should be encouraged to actually participate as much as possible, Wendy. So anything in terms of the labour group you can do, that's very helpful. I do it for the bridge to try and encourage it. But I know people have busy lives and sometimes it clashes and what have you. There might also be when they don't see it's a priority. So I don't know. Some people do, some people don't. But I think the point you make is a fair one. I know the surveys have been done before. Maybe it might be time for another one in due course. I suggest the members of the panel is the best way to.
I think it's something we can relook at.
We can relook at. Yeah. Thanks for that, Councillor Lambert. Councillor Paul.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
You're a long way away tonight, sir.
Yes, I'm in the outbush. Well, don't worry.
Thank
you for allowing me to speak, Chairman. All new councillors, when elected in May, were part of their pack given a questionnaire as to types of learning they may wish to look into also their skills, also times of the day when most convenient for training, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. That comment. Any other questions? Are you happy to set the two recommendations?
Yes,
Oh, sorry,
I think in
I
terms of...
thought I got away with it then. That's right.
I nearly got away. In terms of the financial aspects of the council,
Yeah.
I was proposing those difficulties.
Yes.
I would implore members, new members, in fact, even long-serving members in actual fact to take advantage of that. Because
Yes, I agree.
It's a mysterious business at the best of times, and the opportunity to sort of get a greater understanding seems to me to be absolutely essential. And in the public arena, when you think about it, with the public, who we're there to make certain that we protect the public first
Yes.
against financial drift, is what you might call it. And I think if they would have a right to expect that if they actually checked whether members were taking advantage of such training, that if we weren't in actual fact, it might be a great disappointment to them.
Yes.
Confirm their view that often we make decisions without being very informed.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Carr?
Thank you, Chair. As a new councillor myself, the only downside I found was that a lot of the introductions and training took place during the daytime.
Right.
And when one is trying to hold down a full-time job, it's very difficult to say the least. But I must say that the staff here are excellent. And the officers, you know, if any problems, anything you want to know about, you can phone them up and they'll always help you.
Well, thanks for that, Councillor Carr. And the induction programme, I thought, was in the evening, wasn't it? The induction.
The induction was, yeah,
Yeah,
but
but
the
the other
training
courses-
sessions are all talking
Well, that's
about.
right. Yeah.
Well, if I just answer Councillor Owen's point about the training in terms of how council and local government finance works. We had a really excellent session in the last big meeting where we went through the whole of our medium-term financial plan. We went in depth, drilled down to see why it's formatted the way it's formatted. And I think the intention from right, Chairman, is that we run the same session again. I have to say that coming back to the point about there not being a good attendance, it was one of those meetings where actually it was an awful lot of information about the members and very few members here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not a big turnout.
No, I think that's the point, going to Councillor Randall's point, I think that's the point, isn't it, about, you have to find out what members want, and then if we want something, there's more chance of turn up, if they can. But obviously, I remember the surveys before where you used to say, what's the best time for them? Is it morning, afternoon, or evening? And then what type of things you want to do, and therefore, you're going to get 38 or 36 different answers maybe, but at least you might have a collective view at some point. Well, I have to say the opposite of this council, over my years here, I've always been very good in trying to support member development, and obviously all we can try and do for our groups maybe is to try and encourage members to take it up and for the development panel. And I know there's a lot of good work's gone on that, Mike, and for that panel over the last few years, that's been very good as well. So on that basis, we have to set the recommendations. I think what we should try and do is encourage more people to attend if they can, but you can't force them. It's a matter for them to take that decision if they see it's relevant. And I suppose the relevance of things, we have East Midlands councils which offers a lot of training opportunities if you wish to go on them at no cost. Normally at no cost, that's also another opportunity. Okay, so we have to set those recommendations. Thank you. Moving on to the first resources issue, which is planning for your legal costs. Councillor Gilpin.
Thank you, Chair. You have before you just a short two-page report that seeks funding for a robust defence of the West Ham planning appeal in connection with the refusal of a major housing development. It's essential that these appeals are properly defended. Failure to do this, provide an adequate defence, could result in an award of costs against us. So it's only prudent that we put some resources aside for a robust appeal. The Deputy Chief Executive has approved the use of the contingency funding to meet these costs. However, if there's not sufficient funding or other budget underspends available, it is recommended that these additional costs are met from earmarked legal reserves. As I say, by providing a robust defence, we're taking a prudent approach, and it is hoped that the likelihood of award of significant costs against the council will be reduced. So that is why I ask for this recommendation.
Very soon, Councillor Gilpin. Any comments, questions? You have to set the recommendation?
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Next item is Council Tax Support Scheme 2015-16.
This one's a bit longer than 2 pages, and I'm going to take the time to just go through it a little bit. The report before you provides information on the review of the current council tax scheme in order that a scheme for 2015-16 can be agreed. Now, the history behind this is council tax benefits in England has been localised from April 2013. Council tax benefit was abolished and replaced with the council tax support scheme. Unlike the council tax benefit, which was set by central government, individual local authorities, i.e. DDC, define their own council tax support scheme. Since implementation, funding for the scheme has reduced surprise year on year and will be again for 2015-16 by 15.6%. To put that into money terms, for DDC, the gap between the proposed grant to be received for 2015-16 and the cost of the current scheme is approximately 51,000. For Northamptonshire County Council, the funding gap is around 459,000. The government's confirmed that pensioners must be protected from any change under the new scheme, and authorities are also required to consider what protection is appropriate for vulnerable groups. Financial modelling has been carried out to assess the potential impact of any proposed scheme in the areas of, and they're detailed in the report, the impact on the collection fund, the number of people affected, the vulnerability, the potential for homelessness, child poverty and hardship. The report itself details arrangements for last year and what impact there has been. One thing from that to note is that although there were instrumental changes, our council tax collection rate last year was 98.28%, and we're on target to meet the 98% collection rate set for the current year. So credit must go to the officers for succeeding in still having that high collection rate despite the changes in the scheme, and it also shows the scheme we introduced was the right one because it didn't have a big significant impact on the collection. For 2015-16, as I said, our grant will reduce further by 51,000. We've exhausted our powers with regard to empty property discounts and exemptions for council tax. It's therefore proposed to increase the cap on council tax liability from 8.5% to meet this shortfall, with no other changes to the scheme. The report details the impact this will have. The result of this would be our working age claimants. Remember, we can't we're vulnerable for the IOPs. I will make sure that there's no impact there. But they will have to find towards their council tax from April 2015. Our neighbouring authorities currently charge between 8.5% and 20%, so the benchmarking is being done there, with the exception of Corby and South Northamptonshire councils. They're still considering their options, and they are considering increasing them. We've consulted with each of the authorities, and the authority currently charging 20% have confirmed they're very similar levels of recovery to those paying the full charge for the council tax. So it's important that we don't do a big hike, because if you do that, then you may not collect it and will have the opposite effect. The council is required to consult with those affected by this proposal for 6 weeks and to take this into account with the results of that consultation in the final proposal. There are various options within the report. Option 1, no change, which when facing a deficit and reduction, I don't think is an option. Option 2, a liability cap of 15%. Option 3, a liability of 20%. And option 4, I think is 35%. Option 3 is the one being put forward for approval. This option is similar to option 2, but with the liability cap at 20%, which would raise 30,000 of the 51,000 required, leaving a shortfall of 21,000, which at this point in time I don't know whether it will be met by growth or the savings found within, but there could well be some growth. The actual, I don't like talking in percentages, it's the impact on the pocket, the money. So the increase in working age claimants bills would be in the region of £2.55 a week. Option 4, we've had to look at higher, 35%. 35% would get the 51% back, but that would be an impact of £4.10p per week. And that is a big jump, 8.5% to 35%. There's no easy choices here. You know, I keep saying this, there's tough decisions to be made. The report has itemised many of the specifics and the effect on NCC and the Police Commissioner. For the reasons stated, I've liaised with the Section 15 officer, Audra, and we are suggesting that the optimal balance is to pursue a 20% liability cap. That is paying 80% of affected individuals' council tax bill through the CTSS. This seems at present the best balance to balance the conflicting requirements. The appendix of the report details the results of the impact assessment on taking this approach. So hopefully I've put that a bit in plain English for you, and that you understand why we're going for that option.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Guilford. Just want to remind members tonight it's a resolved item, it's not a recommendation. So it's a resolved item, so I'll open up for questions or comments. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you. I think it's obviously welcome that our collection rates have remained high despite the recent changes. But when we say things like the majority have become used to paying, and that they've adapted to it, I think that sort of glosses over lots of other factors like the increasing use of the food bank and the rise of hardship funds on the part of a number of housing associations, massive increases in personal debt. I think it's a little bit not necessarily complacent, but I think we're not spelling out the truth necessarily if we put it like that. We know the Citizens Advice Bureau have reported that 1 in 5 people coming to them for help are coming for council tax arrears or other related council tax issues, and that most of those people are in employment. So these are the very people we are targeting with changes to this scheme. And we all understand the wider context and the fact that this is a government-led initiative that puts the burden on local government. But I have big concerns about the impact of this change in policy on the most vulnerable people in our district. I mean, I know people who are literally budgeting to the last pound, so £2.55 will make a big difference to them. And I think we need to be much more aware and conscious of the impact of this, and not just assume that people are going to be able to pay what seems a small difference to us.
I thought, sorry, Councillor Campbell, I thought that Councillor Guilford mentioned that we're protecting the vulnerable people.
Yes, it's the increased
pensioners.
The pensioners, the vulnerable won't have an increase.
Yeah.
It's the working.
Yeah, but my point is, it's the working poor that I'm talking about. This is the massive rise, isn't it? And people who are employed but are still living in poverty. I think that's the issue. And that's what the Citizens Advice Bureau is reporting, that people are coming to them with issues about payment who are in employment but can't afford it. So we may not see the difference in terms of people coming here and actually paying up, but the impact is much wider, isn't it?
So what would be your answer, Councillor Campbell?
I would not like to see the policy change from it is. I think it's bad enough that.
Should we take a hit?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. Councillor
So
Campbell.
where would the money come from then if you wouldn't want the policy change?
I think we have to. We don't have an option to consider here. We have 4 options that are very similar, along very similar lines. I think when we put it out to consultation, we should make sure that all those options are put out, not just option 3.
Audra?
There's a couple of things there I'd like to just comment on for members, and I appreciate totally when preparing this report, that there are no easy answers.
Right.
What I would like to draw your attention to is that although we're talking about a relatively small figure, if you like, for Daventry, the £51,000, and it always amazes me that just because we are the collecting authority, that we have the say-so on how these things are applied, but actually the lion's share of this hit is on the county council.
Yes,
and collectively with all of those districts, a lot of the services that the county council support, and you won't need me to tell you the problems that they are having with adult and social services, education and everything else, they're the ones that will feel the hit more. And again, you're talking about another bunch of vulnerable people. So it's a very difficult balance to strike, but they will feel more pain than we will if we make no change.
Thank you. And you can confirm that the consultation will include all 4 options?
No.
No.
We have to consult when we are considering making a change.
Right.
You can imagine already, you have to consult with those people that the change
Obviously people will vote for no change, won't they?
and you'll be asking people, do you want to pay more? You won't be surprised by the general reply that we get from that. Although you may be surprised to know that, and in line with the government's thinking, is that some people do say that they feel better for making a contribution, and it wasn't actually as negative as we expected it to be last time.
It wasn't actually.
That they actually felt better about making the payment about themselves. But I appreciate it's a tough decision to make.
No, I agree that the option is like council tax increase. I'm not going to say no, obviously. We have these referendums, it's a waste of time in a way, because people know what the answer is going to be. Yeah. The point about this one, though, is in terms of the liability cap. What do you think about pensioners is, because not all pensions are poor, of course.
No.
And some pensions can be very wealthy. That's just the way we operate. That's just the way it is.
It's pensioners in receipt of benefits.
Benefits, okay, that's fine. But sometimes, okay, that's fine.
If I can, sorry, just I'd like to talk about the vulnerable, because in terms of the new scheme, some of the things that we operate in this scheme, like for instance, we don't take child benefit into the calculation for deciding how much benefit they get, nor do we for the disability living allowance, or for those that have moved to the new PIP payments, and also war pensions and things like that. So we try to protect the vulnerable that way.
Well, first time round when we did it, which is probably the reason why we haven't had such a big fallout, is because we were very mindful as council of trying to minimise the impact on people, whereas other councils were actually taking steps which would actually have a far bigger impact on the vulnerable. So in a sense, I think this council has done its best up to this point to try and take that into account. And I think the feedback I said earlier shows that sort of works in a sense to minimise the actual impact. Notwithstanding what Abigail was saying, I think to try and minimise it is the best way you can do it, really, rather than have a steep rise in things and then people would have an impact. And then there could be a knock-on effect anyway in terms of collection rates. Okay, any more comments? Councillor Luke.
I think, Chair, yes, I appreciate this council does try to minimise the effects on the vulnerable people, but working people, as Abigail has said, working people are feeling the pinch. They are using food banks. It's a disgrace. They work and they're not earning enough money to keep themselves because wages are too low. So, although I can't offer an alternative, but I can say that I am allowed to say that I don't appreciate what's happening, and I think the council should be getting on to the government to put something fairer in place for people in this society. So,
Councillor Luke, I would accept the fact that there's a lot of working people on low incomes. You only got to look at the growth of GDP, and it's not, if you look at per capita, it's lower actually. People are earning less per capita across the country, because obviously we've been through a massive recession. And if you look at Eurozone today, Eurozone actually at the moment is in a very fragile state, and we're still in a very difficult position worldwide actually on the economy is. So we've got very hard times ahead. I think what we're saying is we're not the government, unfortunately. It'd be nice if we were, because we could change lots of things. But what I'm trying to say is we're trying to be as fair as we can be within the rules that are given to us and the guidelines given to us, which I think we did actually, first time round, we did that quite fairly and tried to minimise the impact. And I think the evidence is showing, because we did it that way, hopefully people, whilst it's not good news, we did try to minimise the bad news. I mean, it's not as though we've got good news for it, it's the fact we have to take difficult decisions. And I understand where you're coming from, but we have to deal with the reality of taking decisions. Right? I accept the point you're making there. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. The way I see it, Chair, is that the cuts have not been done fairly. If you look at some richer areas, they've had lesser severe cuts than poorer areas.
So we're talking about Daventry District, are we?
So Daventry District has been mentioned. They got away loyally at £51,000. Is that right with what they need to find if to put all the with no charge in place, etc. But going back to my point was like, yeah, it'd been said that we're all in it together, but that doesn't seem.
That's the government saying that, yes.
Doesn't seem to be the case here, Chair. You know, and once again, the vulnerable people seem to have to pick up the bill for no fault of their own. But in saying that, the council also, why should they pay, you know, this 51,000 the total price? So, looking from both sides of the arguments, you know, the sanity it might seem is you've got to find some common denominator, you know, halfway meeting place. That's the way I see it now.
Well, I'm just trying to understand, Councillor Carr, when you say we've done better than other places, what else are you comparing it to?
Well, it's reported various councils across the board, across the spectrum. Some councils have had bigger cuts, and some not as big cuts.
I don't know.
You know, it's not being fairly done across the board. It's all according where you live, you see.
Well, I appreciate that, Councillor Carr, but obviously we have to deal with Daventry here, so we have to deal with what we've got to deal with. I can't compare us to anyone else, because obviously we have to deal with what we have. But
it's just coming back to you, it's just a comment that
Okay,
you know, I'd like to make. To me, the way I read it, the way I see it, these cuts haven't been done fairly, you know. And Daventry really have got off lightly to other councils. So, yeah, £51,000 we would have to find if we make that change. We all know that money's got to come from somewhere.
Okay.
Right, so what I'm saying is now is that, you know, you've got to find a sort of midway point. For no fault of the council, no fault of the poorest people in our region, if you like. But
okay, well, we'll come back to that tonight. All I say is that we can only deal with what we can deal with. And I think what we have said earlier is we have tried to be very, very fair in managing our own affairs. We can't talk nationally because obviously we can't control what happens in other councils. And maybe other councils aren't as well run as this authority is in some respects. But the point is, wherever the sum of money is how we actually deal with that, getting that sum of money back. And that's the point we're discussing tonight. Well, I'll let Joe come back. I know Councillor Osborne goes. But first, Councillor Randall.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I was just saying, I know you're mentioning like £2.55 a week, but that still equates to £132 just over a year, so that still is quite a lot of money. I'm having lots of talks with parents over the last few weeks about the reduction in courses in the local college, and they're having to send their children, if they haven't met the grades, they can't go to senior school. They're now having to fund a bus. So that on top of another £600 they're going to have to try and fund. They will get part funding if they're on a low income, but it's the same old thing. If you just walk in that very fine line, you know, my concern is if people can't afford to pay this extra money, and we ended up taking them to court and they can't pay, is it going to cost us more money than what we're going to, you know, try and collect in? And the other thing we've got, last year our collection rate was 98.28%, and this year we're on target to meet 98%.
Yes.
How much does that 0.28% collate to?
Well, or to come back on the first point you said there, when that's exactly the point we raised last time, was to try and minimise the impact, so the actual collection rates would not be affected by that much, and also people themselves, whilst there would be a negative impact, that negative impact would be minimised as far as possible. So really you're saying what we've done already, and what we're trying to do tonight is to try and minimise the impact, but obviously also maximise where we can our collection rates, because obviously that's important for all taxpayers to have that collection maximised as far as possible. Councillor Osborne.
I've got to say, Chairman, that the government has got a system in place which we've got to work with. And as you've been saying for the last 10 minutes, we're doing our best for the vulnerable people of this district to work with it. And this option gives the vulnerable people of the district the best option for us to work with and work with them. There will be problems, as has been outlined. There will be people that can't afford it. But I'm afraid we have tried to help them, and we will try and help them, and this is how we're going to help them. And if people don't like it, Chairman, there's a general election next year. They can always vote a different way.
Okay, and we'll see what happens then. Sorry, just on the point about the 0.28%, what's the difference?
In terms of the difference, before I give you an actual figure about that, remember for us, you know, it's a much smaller part of the bill.
Right,
We're
5%.
talking about the amount that we collect as a collecting authority, and that affects the county council, it affects the police, and it affects us. So whilst it's a much smaller amount for us, it's a much greater amount for the county council. What I would say is that when I put these figures forward, I take into account an assumed collection rate, and 98% is the target for our average collection rate for all council tax. I don't assume that I'll be able to collect 98% of this new allowance, so that's taken into account in working out the 30,000 that this option would bring to us, because I do accept that it may be slightly more difficult to collect.
Thank you. Sorry,
I was only just going to come back. As you were mentioning the county council, what happens then if Corby and South Northants decide to do a no change? Are you saying that that's going to hit harder on the rest of us then?
Yes.
That's what you're saying, is it?
To be truthful, Councillor Randall, yes I am, because whilst it's for each district council to make their decisions on council tax, even if the rest of the districts and the boroughs decide to put it up, a lot of the services that the county council does, if they have to cut those services because the likes of South Northants or Corby are not funding that gap, unfortunately it's the whole county that are affected by the cuts.
Vulnerable people.
And the vulnerable people. So yes, unfortunately, we will be affected by their decisions.
That's right, anyway, in other areas. Okay.
Chair, just quickly coming back to my point there, that's the point I was trying to make.
All right, yes.
Surely the government should have brought in some legislation to the liability of the capping, so all councils would follow suit, and they all had to cap, say, 15% or 20%.
You might have a good idea, Councillor Carr, but the problem is we're dealing with what we're dealing with. You know, they haven't done that, so therefore we are where we are. And Councillor Owen, I'll come back to Councillor Gilbert to sum up. Thank you.
Well, I can see, listen to this, I can see all those arguments, and it's very difficult to know how to weave your way through them and to come out the other side without having affected someone. But I am persuaded by the argument put by the portfolio holder. And I think that that seems to me to the best and the fairest option. And I hope this it's a resolved item, is it from here?
This is resolved item.
I hope that we can resolve it on the advice that I think has been given careful and due consideration. And on that basis, I would hope we might move this debate further. Notwithstanding, I'm understanding that people are very, very different and we come to things like this can be effective.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Sorry.
So if I could just remind members, it's a resolved item about the consultation. You're not making a decision tonight.
Consultation.
I stand to be corrected.
You said resolved items consultation.
I'll try to read my report.
Tony, stop you saying the same
There's
point.
the same point. I mean, it is a consultation.
I'm not taking the decision for that.
And the decision will come back here in due course.
I'm interested to see what the responses will be. Right, Councillor Gilbert.
Okay. I've listened to everybody's comments, and yes, I think I tried to get across in my preamble by the, going through it in detail and explaining we have to give some consideration to this. We realise the impact it will, but as I said in that preamble, we have tough decisions to make. We have to balance our books, and by not trying to balance our books, it will have a bigger impact on us in the future as a council. And I think by taking this halfway position, it will support the council and it will hopefully support the electorate as well. So therefore I put forward this option.
Thank you, Councillor Gilbert. So, members of the strategy group have resolved that for you. Are you happy to set that resolution?
Agree.
Agree. About the consultation?
Yes, we should consult on more than one option.
Okay, fine. Now we go again. Okay, thank you. That's passed then. Move on to the next item, Treasury Management Annual Report 2013-14. Councillor Gilbert.
Okay. Just a short report, this one. It's an annual report. The report before you advises you of the outcome of the Council's Treasury Management activities for 13-14. DDC has a statutory requirement to produce an annual Treasury Management review of its activities, and the actual projected Treasury indicators for 13-14. This report meets the requirements. The report itself details that review and concludes. 13-14 continued to be a positive year for the improved investment returns. The Council's prudent approach and risk-averse policy continues to drive our investment strategy with low returns and future finishing balances being achieved. I therefore ask you to note the report.
Very much indeed. You have a recommendation for us? Councillor Over?
It's interesting, I see that the Bank of England today have kept the interest rate on hold at 12.5%, so there doesn't seem any good news about it, and I was hoping that we might see it move up a bit, but once again, things seem to be forced with the European position now and the United States. Things don't bode too well in terms of big rises in it, so I'm happy to accept this report. I think it's
Very much indeed.
a pretty sound report.
That's Councillor Over. Any other comments? Oh, sorry, Councillor Chapter.
A simple comment, Chairman. Having received the papers and read them, I happened to be in an environment where I was with a number of constituents. We hadn't met for any particular purpose connected with council, but I happened to mention our recovery rate from Iceland, and they were surprised and very pleased. They hadn't realised that we'd managed to, that the LGO had managed to negotiate such a high return.
That's good to hear.
So perhaps we should make more of that.
Well, I think, we do give information out as and when we can, and of course at one time when it first broke the news, we were told we lost £8 million. I suppose you start from that position. It is only good news, but I know the recovery rate's about over 90% or thereabouts, so it is a very good, in the end, position, even though of course we prefer not to be in that position in the first place. In reality, being truthful about it, but then obviously a lot of people, including the Audit Commission, were caught up in the same storm. And it's always the same, as you chase the higher interest rate, there's always, as you learn from experience, and that's also something we should be mindful of today actually. Councillor was talking about the Bank of England rates. It's going to be inevitable before long, the interest rates will rise, and of course that can have an impact elsewhere on the economy. So it's all very fragile now. And the Eurozone is not looking good at all. The Eurozone is looking very bad. So are we happy to set the recommendation?
Thank
you. I'll move on to the last one, Councillor Gilbert, which is 2015-16 capital revenue budget.
Okay.
Medium-term plan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as this is the last report, so I'll be able to pick up soon. The report before you provides a financial overview of the 15-16 capital and revenue budget and medium-term financial plan. Since the medium-term financial plan was approved in February 2014, assumptions now need to be further updated and revised to reflect decisions agreed by Council at its meetings of June and July last year. These further assumptions are detailed within the report 3.2, the Daventry Town Centre vision, the business team restructure, the capital programme changes and the broadband. In addition to these items, the following issues and proposals will be developed as part of the 15-16 budget setting and medium-term financial process, again detailed in the report. That's the settlement funding, the non-domestic rates retention scheme, the approved and ongoing savings matrix, new homes bonus, annual council tax increases, the council tax support scheme, which we just spoke about, and the 13-14 outturn position, 14-15 outturn position, and any growth criteria for capital revenue. Table 5.1 therefore shows the updated position after this. The impact of the above year-on-year budget surplus and deficits result in total revenue reserves dropping from 14.060 in 13-14 to 9.701 billion by the end of 17-18. As in previous years, this council has responded well to the challenges that severe cuts in funding brought. Our prudent financial management continues to pay dividends and allows the council to respond in a considered manner to its changes in funding levels. There is, though, increased risks to the authority now that we are directly affected by collection levels of non-domestic rates, and we are also exposed to changes in the levels of those claiming council tax support, given that the funding for the scheme is both reducing and not increased based on demand. Therefore, I constantly say this, there's still challenges ahead, not least of which will be the delivery of the town centre vision and the assumed revenue impact of saving initiatives that have yet to be delivered. I therefore ask you to approve the recommendations within the report.
Thank you, Councillor Guilford. Any questions or points to that one?
No, I think so. I think what I would say is that we're still a very ambitious council.
Yeah.
Ambition tends to cost money. I think we have, over the years, put in place mitigation the council can suffer as a result of its ambitious plans. And it just carries on in that theme.
About being consistent, which you pointed out already, Councillor Guilford, and that's that prudence and consistency alongside the ambition, because the ambition is important for the local communities we represent, to actually represent them well. It's paying dividends on the low council tax as well, so it's trying to be a winner in all areas, but it's not always easy, and I think members of this council have taken a very prudent and sensible approach over the years. Councillor Over.
So just adding to that, the Daventry Town Development Implementation Working Group was meant to have met over yesterday, and the chief executive dropped in to make sure we were behaving ourselves, which I think is the right thing to do, but at the end of the day...
I did send them in to do that.
Yes, I understood that. At the end of the day, there was a general accord there that the plans we have and the aspirations we have for the future were people like we believe that this community is really interested in. I think it is right that the council still is aspirational, and that is what councils have to be all about, as well as being prudent. And there was a general, in terms of the agenda we have, there was a fairly comfortable position there. There was no objections. So where we come from in 2002, where we started, where are we now, and where we're hoping to achieve in the future. I think I can say this, including the member from the town council, who also gave broad support that we were doing things in the right direction. Albeit things are slowed a bit because of the position of the economy, and we're not in a position to force Henry Hughes or anyone else to do this and the other just on the basis of a win, just to accelerate things. I'm fairly comfortable with that agenda, but hopefully we will go through to the machinery of the office of the working group to finally turn up here sometime in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Councillor. Yeah, we're in an environment of very... sorry, do you want to speak, Councillor Hills?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. When I looked through this, I agree with what all the comments have been made about council being prudent, and I think as a council the finances have been handled very well. One of the things when I read through this was 4.19, where it says the national average district council tax, £167, is 25% higher than the existing DDC charge of 135.72, and probably even higher when special expenses are removed. And I think this is the remark that I think really needs underlining. So there is scope to remain a low tax authority whilst achieving at least a large degree of self-sustainability in the foreseeable future.
Yeah,
I think it sums up this report and what it's all about.
It's been a consistent policy over many years, and it's paid off. Okay, we have to set the 4 recommendations.
Agreed.
Thank you, Councillor Guilford. We move now to housing and environmental health issues, focused allocations review, consultation responses. Councillor Warren.
Thank you, Chair. This report basically relates to policy change. The purpose of the report is to consider the recommendations made following the consultation focused allocations review on the allocation scheme. The scheme was adopted in July 2013 with a request for the 12-month review be undertaken. Since that request was made, a number of issues arose which required a focused review of the scheme. A couple of items that were highlighted were, one, introduction of additional statutory guidance on providing social housing for local authorities in England, and two, the prospect of development starting in the near future within Daventry District, part of the NRDA, which is the Northampton-related development area, which would require an adjustment to the allocation scheme to allow for people with a Northampton connection. The proposed changes to the allocation scheme are set out in 4.2 and 4.3 of the report, and I propose that it be recommended.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Any comment? Councillor Osborne.
I must make the comment, I should be in the minority, but all these
it's nice to have houses allocated for people that live in your district or are associated with your district and get points accordingly. But when I was housing chairman, we housed for housing need, and it doesn't talk too much on housing need. It talks a lot about your brother and your sister and your mother and your father. I personally believe housing need is a bigger factor, and also the comments that have come into the responses about local need and everything. And I've always believed that need is more important, whilst recognising, because we all represent areas where people are hoping to get housing and will never get them because they're not in the need, as great a need as other people. I wouldn't expect the complete council to share that view, but it's a view that I hold quite strongly.
Okay, Steve, I know your background in housing as well. Thank you for that. Do you want to comment that, Ray, at all? Or not? Housing need? Sorry, Simon.
Thank you, Chairman. In simple terms, the allocation scheme does provide priority for those in housing need, but it simply provides them to people with some kind of connection to Daventry district or proposed Daventry district or the Northampton West Daventry area. So the housing need is very, very strongly built into the system. It's just that it does define the people to whom the council has some kind of duty. It's ultimately a choice of members, but that's what you decided 18 months ago when we last made the allocation scheme.
Thank you, Simon. Councillor Chapter.
Thank you, Chairman. I found this paperwork actually quite fascinating, particularly when I read through the responses that have been given. And reading them, one might almost be tempted to suspect that there was some form of local xenophobia in place, and that anyone who came from Northampton was to be eschewed. But I believe, seriously, that this might indicate a lack of public understanding of what it was that we were talking about in this paper. I don't know how many of these papers are actually read by members of the public, but when you ask for responses, and those are the responses you get, I think we should be flagging up a concern that we perhaps are failing to engage effectively with the people in general so that they're not understanding what it is we're trying to do and why.
Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Chair. As a new councillor, I'd just like quickly if somebody could brief me on this system. How does it all work? Is it on some sort of a point system where, you know, if you've got a mother or father in the district, you get 2 points, and if so, how does it all work?
Mike, I always find it hard to think of each new council card to remember from years ago. But Simon, want to just go on to that point?
Chairman, there are 4 main bands, A to D, well, in different levels of need. There's also an emergency band for people in particularly urgent need of accommodation. It's no longer a point system, that was a band quite some time ago, but there are 4 priority bands and you can prioritise within those using a system of stars to indicate a particular level of priority within those 4 priorities.
Thank you, Simon. Maria?
And just to clarify, the point about local connection, you don't get on the list at all unless you've got a local connection. And we had to bring that in, if members aren't very recall the debate 18 months ago, because we for a long time had an open waiting list, as did most local authorities. It was best practice, but we were forced down the route of having to reconsider and have and close our waiting list and consider local connection, because literally everyone around us was doing so in light of national changes, and if we were the only ones with an open waiting list, we would have had a massive increase in demand that we wouldn't have been able to cope with.
Thank you, Maria. Councillor Luke.
Thank you, Chairman. The social housing that's going to be built in the Northamptonshire area that's in Daventry district, answering the consultation, I felt that people in the Daventry district should get first priority of the social housing in that area.
What's this talk about Northampton related to Daventry? This is actually Northampton's growth.
Yes, I know, but it's in our district.
I know it's in our district, I know.
That's why I
have some correspondence on that at the moment, actually, yes. Okay. Councillor Over?
The Joint Strategic Planning Committee, as my colleague here would know, chewed this one over, and I do have some empathy with Steve Osborne's view on this, because there is a danger in all this. So the majority of people in this area now have come from somewhere else, and we're going to a situation whereby they're just not good homes for Northampton folk. It is that we are now going into a sort of slightly incestuous position, whereby it's cousins, uncles, aunts, and everything, which are in actual fact being gathering homes, as it were, in around it. I don't know whether that in actual fact is healthy in genetic terms, and secondly, I'm not certain it's particularly healthy in terms of.
You've got a large family, Councillor.
Really, yeah. Sorry, what am I saying? I haven't got that's a slip of the tongue or something. All I'm trying to say, I do have some sympathy. I do understand what's going on here, and I think it's striking the balance on those things, and I would want to make certain that we do have, as it were, a degree of openness about people moving into this area, because quite clearly we've had that in the past, and even this chamber reflects much of that.
Thank you, Councillor. There's a quick comment.
Just wanted to point out briefly, Chairman, that if the Northamptonshire regional development area wasn't happening, if that growth wasn't happening, then those houses would not have been allocated anyway, regardless of whether they're in our district or in another district. And there will, of course, be opportunities for people who live in Daventry district to take advantage of the economic growth of Northampton and go there to work. Especially when the new road.
Thank you. Councillor Atterbury.
Yeah, well, the demand for the need, I mean, that's what the banding does. If you don't in the need, don't get it banding, then you're graded.
Yeah.
And we did up the percentage of affordable homes in all the planning applications to 29%.
Yes.
So really, we've got to get a fair housing stock to accommodate these people. So really, the need is, or the demand is being delivered by the need.
And interestingly enough, during the downturn, actually, in some villages like Brixton, we had a lot of affordable housing units built. The market housing sort of died a death, and more affordable units came in. But that's just one bit on that.
And the local bit was brought in because a lot of people from London and those sort of places were coming in, and the local people couldn't get on.
That's right.
Couldn't get a house, and that's really why we brought that in. And I think we've got a fair system now, personally.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Abel?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just looking at the responses. I mean, there seems to be a lot of people put responses about are we truly meeting the needs of social housing? I mean, it says on one comment from DDH that we now very often let 3-bedroom houses to banded D applicants. Well, at one time, if you were in a band D, you'd never get a property. In fact, you'd hardly get a property if you was in a band C. So to think that now that, you know, people are getting these houses because the bedrooms, you know, they're 3-bedroom houses, and if they fall into it, if they go into a 3-bedroom and they've got that council and you know, what we call the bedroom tax, they can't afford to pay it. So you know, it is meeting the needs. I mean, if we need, I'm hearing all the time there's 1- and 2-bedroom properties that we seem to be really short of.
Okay. And I know that you know, like DDH and other affordable housing providers have reduced the most, and it's a matter then to try and find a way through it. Okay, back to you, Councillor Wyman, if you want to add.
Just to summarise, that I would ask that you approve the recommendation that the responses to the consultation focused allocation review on the housing allocation scheme as set out in Appendix A be noted, and 2, that the changes to the housing allocation scheme set out in section 4.2 and 4.3 of the report be made.
Are you happy to set that recommendation? Just consider it. Is that agreed, committee? Agreed. Thank you, Councillor Warren. Move on now to strategic planning issues. First item is Northampton Growth Management Scheme. Councillor Charter.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll try and make it as brief as possible. I'm going to assume that you've all read the paper. What we're asking here is simply to endorse the revisions to the Memorandum of Understanding for the Northamptonshire Growth Management Scheme. I hope that people will take the opportunity, if they haven't already, of reading that document, which we ask that should be circulated to everybody. It's also placed on the web in an accessible place, because I think it does help to address some of the issues that often get raised when we're discussing the growth agenda in Daventry district, what's going to happen about the roads. And I think this shows that not only that there is a scheme in place to take account of all of that need, but that it's kept under review. So the recommendation here is, okay, it's the Memorandum of Understanding has been updated to reflect current legislative and policy circumstances. It doesn't contain a definitive table of schemes and their respective impacts, because they seem to change almost by the day. So there will be no point in trying to put that in this document, which is an enabling document. Nevertheless, it does bring to your attention the fact that there is a possible, some might see it as an interference, but the Highways Agency are suggesting that if you bring forward a development which hasn't made provision for the funding of the growth management scheme, then they're going to put a holding direction on that and say you can't allow that to go ahead until the money's been made available or has been promised in some way. So I think that's sensible. And as I say, if you read the document completely, you should have a better understanding of how these things work. If you are interested, and I'll assume that you are, I can just point out quickly, because there are so few of them, the changes in the Memorandum of Understanding, which are quite simply that some are pure administrative. In the Section 1, the list of parties involved, it includes the deletion of the West Northamptonshire Development Corporation, because it no longer exists. On the second page, the paragraph 2.4, words have been added there to underline and clarify the fact that no improvements to the M1 are required other than the improvement to junction 15. That's what they believe, so that's what they say. And then the next change is under roles and responsibilities on page 4, paragraph 6. There's a little bit of new text. The agency, that's the Highways Agency, bearing in mind that that will cease to exist soon and be called something else. The Highways Agency is tasked with helping deliver sustainable local economic growth. Well, yes, so it should be, because we're all in this together. And then there's a whole new paragraph, paragraph 6.5 on page 6, is the paragraph making the point about the possible imposition of a holding direction by Highways Agency and its successors if there is no promise of funding associated with a particular bit of the development growth. Otherwise, the document remains unchanged, and we've also managed to get for you circulated the original Annex 3, which is the delivery process of the growth management scheme, and I think you might have found that interesting. And I hope that having read it and understood it, and if you don't understand it, seek clarification, it will help you to deal with some of the comments that you will receive from constituents when they say, we've got all these roads and the roads are in a terrible state already, why don't they do something about that? Well, it's thought of. Not promising delivery, but it's in the scheme.
So, Councillor Chandler, just confirm how the council going to call on the government through which route? For the LEPs, or is it going to be, is that Simon answer? Is that
I can't answer that.
So, on the second recommendation.
The second recommendation.
How are we going to call on the government? Is it why are we going to do it for delivery body or for ourselves directly?
Well, we already have a letter that's gone from the Transport Steering Group for West Northamptonshire to the Highways Agency, and we understand that's been favourably received. What they're not going to tell us, because until the route strategies are announced later this year, nothing can be said. However, we've seen no harm at all in this council writing again, pointing out that with the endorsement of members, we identify this as something important that should be funded through the National Roads Programme, and just adding a little bit more weight to that process.
Thank you for that clarification.
And if you agree with these recommendations, then presumably that will come forward to a council meeting.
It'll come forward in 4 weeks, yes.
Yeah, and we will then, by then, perhaps have a better answer to that question.
Thank you, Councillor Chandler. Councillor Osborne?
Does this scheme affect the wards around Thorpe and Span?
Around?
Well, it says it affects the wards around Thorpe and Span. Or am I on the wrong page?
Molson, Redisford, Spratford.
Yeah, how does it affect
I don't know.
Chairman, the reason the 3 wards are listed is because it's development in this district, both the north of Northampton and related to Northampton, that triggers the need for contributions to pay for the road to the south of Northampton, and those are the 3 wards within which
They are
those
actually
developments will arise.
Spratford and Molson.
But they're around Thorpe.
Redisford's part of the west side of North. No, it's not Brinton's, it's down the Halston.
Halston.
Being there county council. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's 1,000 homes going in.
Okay.
Let's talk about selling how
The Halston's an area. Sorry.
Are you happy for those two recommendations to be approved?
Agreed.
Thank you. Next paper is the neighbourhood area application for Guilsborough, Woodford, Halston and Overston.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. We've had some familiarity with the process of neighbourhood planning, and we're coming through in bulk now. There are 4 before you this evening. I don't think I need to reiterate all of the notes about the process. They're in the paper if you can't remember them. Just some comments to make on each of the 4. The application by Guilsborough Parish Council is to call the whole parish a neighbourhood development area. There's no business development associated with it, so it's a straightforward one. Similar comments apply to Woodford Members. It's the parish and it's not a neighbourhood area. There was some talk earlier as whether or not part of the Woodford Members parish might be thought of as a separate business development area. It's not big enough to make a difference. So that's also a straightforward one. The other 2 are slightly more complicated. Not really. Halston Parish Council wanted the parish to be, but of course part of Halston Parish is within the Sustainable Urban Extensions for the Northampton Growth Area, and so that had to be left out, and they agree with that. And again, there's no business area associated with that. And then finally, Overston, which is really odd, in that if you take the parish of Overston and then you draw the boundary of the SUE, which they obviously have to leave out, you've got a bit that's almost seceded, it's hived off. And so they decided not to include that in the neighbourhood development plan. Possibly they were looking much further ahead and thinking, well, the growth is bound to go that way, or we encourage it to go that way. And the idea behind their neighbourhood development area is that they want to preserve the village of Overston, which is seen as a fairly compact and intimate linear development. And again, it's not a business area. So I think that's straightforward enough, Chairman.
It's very good to see this parish is getting engaged in this process.
It is indeed, Chairman.
I know everywhere I go we talk about it. Councillor Osborne.
Same question as last time. It says wards affected, Long Buckby. Owners of those neighbourhoods.
Where's Long Buckby?
On the top, first page, Guildford. It says Long
Long
Buckby.
Buckby, Guilsborough. Guilsborough. Part of Long Buckby ward. Yes, the ward.
You've not been there, see?
I thought you meant the villages.
Wards.
That's right.
Just testing.
Just testing.
That's what it is.
Says they not leave there.
There are 4 recommendations. Are you happy to set the 4 recommendations?
Agreed.
Can I just say, terrible apologies for me. I forgot Liz Griffin's apologies. She never did me, I didn't put those in. So that's just to put me apologies. That concludes this evening's meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you.